Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's fireside chat on mental health and well-being with Karen Rosenberg. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sherilyn Felix, and I'm one of the co-chairs for Women of Avalara. So today what we're going to do is a little bit different kind of setup than what we've had in the past. We're trying out different ways to do our fireside chats. So I'm actually in the Durham office today, and Karen is in Boca Raton, Florida. So we're hoping that you can all hear us better today. We are in Durham on the 4th floor training room, so in the office, come on up. And we are also in Seattle, but I'm not sure what room in Seattle is there. If you can put that in the chat, that would be awesome. The way we're going to do this today is Karen and I are just going to have this talk, and we're going to ask some questions on mental health and well-being. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A or chat box. Sarah's going to facilitate questions out of Seattle, and I'll go ahead and take them out of Durham as we go along. One thing we really wanted to do today was really make sure that we included our men in mental health and well-being because, you know, we do a lot for Women of Avalara, but this is a really big topic that for everyone. So we're going to address some of those items for men and women today as well. So I met Karen. She's actually my child's therapist. I have 2 little girls, 10 and 12, and I'm a divorced mom, and we've had a lot of things going on over the last couple of years. So I found Karen through my therapist, and my girls love her. And the reason I put that out there is because it's nothing to be ashamed of, right? So we all have a therapist, or some of us don't want to admit it. But Karen is great. My therapist is great. And I'd like Karen to go ahead now and introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her background. Karen?
Sure. Hi, thank you so much for including me for this very special afternoon. I really appreciate it, and the topic is so critically important. So kudos to you all for joining this afternoon and for making this happen. And thank you for what you said about myself working with your girls. They're lovely, and I enjoy spending time with them as well. Of course, I wouldn't have mentioned it had you not. It's all confidential and private, but you brought it up, so I can certainly chime in. I am actually celebrating this week, July 4th, is 20 years I am in private practice. This is my anniversary of my private practice here in Boca. Prior to that, I did 7 years of hospice work, specializing in grief, loss, and trauma. That really is my main area of specialization. Within that is postpartum depression, fertility, and child loss, and other women's health issues kind of come within that scheme as well. So that's, I also do hypnotherapy services and EMDR, which is 2 other kinds of clinical trainings that I do and interventions working with clients.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about your work with Parkland?
Sure. So because I do grief, loss, and trauma counseling, a couple of us got together very quickly by that night, actually, and kind of formulated a group of clinicians that were willing to volunteer their time providing pro bono, free counseling, just doing whatever we could do. So a lot of us, just from being in the community for a long time, were receiving referrals from the community, families, teachers, students, and such. And within that, after several months, I'm now part of a nonprofit organization where I serve on the board of that organization, again, providing pro bono services for the community, training, resources, support. We're planning a retreat right now. We're doing a little bit of fundraising, but I still have quite a few clients that I work with pro bono from the Parkland community as well.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about what being mentally and emotionally healthy means. I think everybody has a different opinion for themselves, but what does it really mean?
Sure. So it really means at its core how to handle emotions, right? So being mentally and emotionally healthy, it's about paying attention to what that mental wellness and that that approach of being healthy in terms of self-care and stress reduction overall. So it's being able to regulate emotions in a very kind of even, calm way. So, and how you approach, I guess, situations that may come up that may present challenge. When you have a kind of an emotional, mental, healthy viewpoint, you can handle obstacles and stress much more easily.
Okay. Yeah. Has anyone, you can do it by a show of hands, raise your hand. Has anyone ever had a mommy dearest moment?
Hello.
If you don't know who Mommy Dearest is, look it up. It's a great movie, but
Yes.
several of those. So
Yes.
can you also tell us, Mommy Dearest moments often come for me when I'm super stressed or very exhausted, right? So how does that stress and exhaustion affect your physical health, not just your mental health?
Right. So there's very much a mind-body connection, and it's so important to have a sense of creating mental wellness that is healthy, because we have the ability to really impact how we feel physically, right? So even kids, if you ask them how they're feeling, they're not going to say to you, little children especially, they're not going to say to you, I'm feeling really sad about the fact that I got a D on my test and the kids are being mean to me at school. They're going to say, my stomach hurts, I have a headache. So there's a real somatic reaction. Of course, it's teaching kids the language to be able to articulate feelings, but there really is a mind-body connection, right? When people get upset, you feel that physiological, your heart pounding, you feel a headache coming on, your face may flush and you feel sweaty. So everything's very interconnected.
What are some tips? Because, everybody will say, oh, do yoga, go to the gym, get it, manage your stress. But what are some tips to manage that stress and anxiety if you just don't have the time? It's really challenging to get there.
Yeah, right. It is. And one of the main things, I probably tell this to almost every single client, because that's an issue for many people. Although phones are very challenging in so many ways in our life, but having a phone and having the app, the meditation apps that you can do that are free, a lot of them are free, and they're short, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes long. So there's a few of them. Aware is one that I recommend a lot. That one I believe is free. Calm Meditation Studio, I think it maybe costs $3. And they actually have programs that, from something as simple as having a peaceful day to how to manage anxiety to how to deal with fear of flying. I mean, you can't believe on the gamut that there's these very short things. So that is one thing you can use, are these wonderful apps. Another thing is your breath. Remember, you have your breath. I think we forget we're carrying our lungs and our oxygen with us wherever we go. And the first thing, that's kind of your immediate first aid of self-care, is breathing. When you're not taking deep cleansing breaths, you're actually not giving yourself the oxygen that it needs to feel calm, slows your heart rate down. So that's the first thing always, is to remember to breathe. Sure.
When I'm feeling stressed at work, or there's a lot of things going on, which I know all of us have fire drills left and right, and some days are worse than others. What, in that moment when you feel the anxiety building, and I don't think about meditation or breathing, what can I do? I'd step away from my computer.
Right. So taking a time out. And I think remembering, maybe even saying to yourself in this moment that the cognitive, the way we think and really does impact how we feel and then how we behave. So it's changing your thinking. So in that moment when you're feeling like you're just so overwhelmed and you cannot even, there's just too much on your plate, you're feeling stressed about what's happening at the end of the day, just remember, maybe it's saying a brief little mantra, I'm okay, I got this, it's under control. Something as simple as that, it gives you a moment to pause and then react accordingly.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So Mental Health Awareness Month was in May. We're a couple months behind that, but they used the hashtag Break the Stigma, right? What does that mean, and how can men and women alike overcome that stereotype that comes with therapy or meditation or the stress and anxiety of everyday life?
So one of the most important things, I'm so glad that you bring this up, is if we can create a culture where mental wellness is the priority instead of thinking about it as mental illness, right there you're breaking down a barrier of eliminating the stigma where people would then feel much more comfortable getting the help that they need. So it changes the negative beliefs. It's a paradigm shift, a complete paradigm shift of allowing individuals, men and women, kids, adults, help they need, think that there's something wrong with them, right? If we have an issue with, as kids, right, they have asthma, you bring them to the doctor, they break their arm, you go to the orthopedic, you get a cast. It's all the same if we just approach it in that very same way.
You know, parents in the workforce really struggle with that work-life balance. And we've addressed for Women of Avalara work-life balance before, and what that means is so unique to different people. But what I want to ask you about today is work-family balance, right? Historically speaking, much of that family balance tends to fall greater on the women, just by history standards, right? So how can families achieve better balance at home, at work, and in their families? And what are some things that we can do to bring everybody together so that women don't feel like it's so much on them, but also makes the dads feel more involved? Now, the caveat to that is I do know some people who have dads that stay at home, and we have stay-at-home dads too, or they're single dads, or dads that carry most of that weight. So, you know, we can say it's just for women, but it's really not. So how do you keep that balance?
Right. It's so true. And there's many ways to kind of really look at the partnership of when you have two partners that are in the house to take care of a child, that it's a lot of times it's really divide and conquer, right? And I really, when I'm working with couples, and this is something that brings clients in oftentimes, is somebody's feeling more overwhelmed, that their partner isn't picking up the slack, doing what they need to do. They feel all the pressure, and women tend to just kind of bring that on naturally themselves. But I've seen where men feel that they have, I've had clients, and they are coming home after working all day, and they still have to make dinner, and they still have to take care of the kids as well, and their wife or partner doesn't do that part as well. So it really is looking at how to divide and conquer that and as fair, with as much compromise as possible. And setting the tone, I think, the minute you leave work, and for some people they have a commute, for some people they work out of the house. Challenging when you work out of the house. You don't have that commute to kind of unplug. You're just kind of in it. You're there. When you have a commute, you could take advantage of that and utilize that commute to kind of start to unplug by what you're listening to. So when you walk in the house, maybe you already kind of know what your role and responsibility will be. Maybe the night before you're going to talk about it with your partner or spouse of how to best handle it the very next day. Maybe it's a schedule. If you have a baby that's waking up every single night and both of you are working, you're alternating nights, you're taking turns. So some of those are things that can definitely help, and making sure that you're taking care of yourself within that too, because and I know we'll talk, a bit about communication. If you're taking care of you, you're having that time to get to the gym, and the other person will pick up the slack. So the next day, the other person can do that to communicate.
What are some of those self-care options and some things that we might not think about day to day? I mean, we talked a little bit about meditation. Mm-hmm. What else can we do to self-care?
Yeah, so self-care can be something as simple as maybe there's something that a person used to do that they hadn't done in a long time. I have a client that just started taking piano lessons. She hadn't taken piano lessons since before she had kids, and it's something she really missed. So she's found a way with her husband how to make that happen, and he's supporting that endeavor because that's part of her identity. Because we're talking about identity, right? We're not just mothers, we're not just fathers. We're our own person, our own unique individual. And I think self-care is so much identifying the pieces of that identity that make us who we are, to make us better mothers and better fathers, or better individuals in life, for sure. So self-care can look like, of course, sleep, um, eating healthy, making sure you're paying attention to exercise, like I mentioned earlier, taking times to relax, doctor's appointments, the physical health. How often are we neglecting ourselves? We're taking our kids to the doctors, or but we're not necessarily taking care of ourselves, doing that, the annual exams and the colonoscopies when we turn 50, these kinds of things. Regular checkups are important. And also self-care is something like humor and joy and remembering to laugh, right? It creates a lot of levity when we can laugh at what's going on also. So those are some really important things to do too.
Good. We talk about, well, postpartum is a real issue for women, right? And we find that it's not just an issue for women, but it's really hard on our spouses and our partners as well. So I'm not just referring to postpartum depression, but just that struggle that comes after you have children, right? There's a lot of guilt and pressure as a mom coming back to work because, you know, in the US, a lot of countries have great maternity, paternity leave, but in the US, ours is very limited. So what's your advice to women in this stage of their lives? And for the men, what are some things they can do to support this stage for their partner?
Yeah. The working mom guilt is a real thing. That's something that is there often, that people feel. You feel guilty when you're at work and you're not home taking care of your child. And for working moms too, that even during that time of postpartum, before they go back during maternity leave back to work, they're feeling guilty if they aren't managing the things at work. So there's different things that can happen. One, depending on what the childcare situation is. If you have a nanny at home and you are taking care of your baby, making sure that there's real good communication with that nanny, that they're documenting, that they're journaling, even the simple things, you know, like took 3 ounces of milk, but seemed more smiley today, you know, making sure that there's real communication frequently, keeping a little journal that they have right there at home. So when you get home, you get to see what happened. And I think remembering too that it's okay. These adjustments take time. People think that when they have a baby, they're just going to be like right in it and falling right into the routine. And it is not an easy thing. It's kind of the thing nobody tells everybody, how hard it's going to be when you become a mom, and then balancing out with going back to work as well. Creating as much routine can help for sure. If somebody has their child in childcare, the guilt of not being there for sure with their child, there might be the apps you can watch your kid, although I'm not a huge fan of that because people can get very obsessive with staring and seeing what's going on with the nanny cam through the apps, but it does help, you know, you need to just kind of check in. Some workplaces I know have childcare even at their workplace if you're fortunate enough for that. But from an emotional standpoint, I think it's just really important to identify what the good feelings are, maybe even a paradigm shift. When you're at work and you've gone back to work, you can make a phone call and maybe think clearly, right? That's not a bad thing if you've left your child at home, and you can catch up with something that you need to do that you can't focus on when you're at home. But when you're at home, it's that quality time that you're going to have with your child. And again, that's okay. And knowing that you don't have to do it all. So to answer your question, if you have a partner or spouse at home, that planning together what that's going to look like, that support is important. From an emotional standpoint, that's key to help prevent postpartum depression. The sleep, the eating, and the support makes a huge difference. And one of the guilt things also, that feeling like they're not having enough time with their child, there are things you can do on the weekends. There's mommy and me's, there's meetups that are on the weekends also. Not everything is during the week. You know, there might be some timeshare work that you can do.
We had a question from a mom in the audience, and I think that this is a good time to ask it. When you have one child, right, there's kind of, as a working mom, this challenge within your head. You know you want to have more children, but how do you decide, right? So it's kind of a back and forth. If having just one kid is going to make your child lonely growing up, how do you decide? And are children that are like only children, do they really struggle as much as we think they do?
That's an excellent question that comes up often with clients, and there's a myth of a phenomena called the lonely only, and it is a myth. There are some amazing books that I recommend when clients are dealing with just this exact thing, about how incredible it is to have one child and the opportunities that having that one only child can have. From a financial standpoint, you aren't paying for a second child's college and travel. You can invest a little bit more into this child. Children that do not have siblings at home often are mature in a way. They're given opportunities that they wouldn't be able to have otherwise. So to not feel guilty about that there's not a sibling. I see this with fertility all the time. Some clients struggle so much to have that one child, and they are not able to have a second child, and to really accept that the beauty of this one child is totally okay and can even thrive. And with whether there's family in the area, maybe cousins of a certain age, maybe play dates. I see this with old kids who are older, who are teenagers, the challenge, because teenagers kind of pull back from their parents. So a lot of times when families travel, they'll bring their teenagers' friends with them, and they're still together with their team, but there's a friend there too, so they could still hang and be okay.
Great. Avalara now offers paternity leave as well as maternity leave, which is new to a lot of dads and men, right? What are some of the best ways to maximize this time at home to bond with baby and mom and the family, right? Because it's not just time off. I know moms are thrilled. They have help with the laundry and as it grows. But what are some of the best ways that dads can get involved? Because it's really hard for moms. Mom and baby is such an intimate relationship, right? To make it a family time.
Mm-hmm. Sure. There are some places that even have Daddy and Me for little babies too. Like for early on, there's a lot of free programming that parents can go to with their babies, like newborn nurturing support, things like that. So it is important for the dad to have a bond just as much. Now, sometimes this could bring up the question, but I'm nursing my baby, so I'm like the food source, so I have to do everything. No, it doesn't have to be that way, because especially if somebody's going to be going back to work, maybe they're pumping. If they're going to be nursing their baby, they're pumping, they're starting to stockpile milk. That's a real opportunity for the dad during that time to start to be able to bond and feed the baby using bottles with the breast milk, if that's what ends up, or if you're doing supplements, and that's okay too with formula, but allowing the dad to feed, that's a really important part as well. And then the challenges happens, and I think somehow it's very instinctual. We feel like we kind of know it all when we become a mom. We know everything, but I think the thing that's important is to remember they have become a parent as well for the exact amount of time. They may do things a little bit differently, and that's okay, and to allow that time and space. So where the baby may bond with the mom, the baby's going to bond with the dad too, and they may come up with other solutions and other ways of rocking the baby or swaddling or putting the baby down. So giving them that opportunity and working together, having time together as a family, but also allowing each to have some time individually with the baby too. It gives the other person a break too.
Yeah. This is purely a selfish question. Patient with my ex-husband at all. But it's because dads are learning, and some of them are great, but some dads just don't know how to put on a diaper or haven't had that experience before, right? What are good ways for the moms to be patient? How do we do that? Because I was...
Yeah. Right. It's so funny how that happens. It's this very thing that comes over us that we feel we literally know everything. And some dads are pretty good and are like as invested in researching the stroller as the mom, you know, I would say that's not the majority for sure. Not typically. So that breathing stuff we were talking about, that all goes hand in hand with being patient. It might even be if you're, well, with an ex-husband, they're not living in the house. If it's your spouse, it might be literally walking out of the room. Because if you see what's going on, it makes it worse. If you're not happy with what they're doing and it's not how you would do it, and you're thinking, you know, the baby's still crying, but if you only just do this, it also might be communicating with your partner, like to say, if you need any help or guidance, I'm here. Feel free to ask me. I'm a resource. So that way it doesn't feel like a competition. Who's doing it right? Who's doing it best? Too collaborative. Yeah.
Yeah, I could probably use work on that. Remind me about that. So let's talk about single parents for a second, right? I mean, that struggle is real for sure. There's a lot of single moms and a lot of single dads in general. And some have support systems, right? Grandparents or co-parenting even, 50% with mom, 50% with dad, and I think that helps. But there are quite a few that just have no one to really help with that day to day. That can be, I have friends, a friend of mine has 3 children and dad passed away a couple of years ago and she did it all by herself. So it's a very taxing thing on a parent. What resources are out there for single parents that we just don't know about or even consider because we're so stuck in it?
I think we could use more resources. I don't think there's as much as there should be. So depending on, from a financial standpoint, if people are looking at needing certain help with rent, and there are some, there's some government programming in terms of like that. From a caregiving standpoint, that's a challenge. There's not a whole lot available. What I've seen can happen very organically within community. So for instance, I have a client right now that I know whose husband has been very, very ill and is dying. He's dying. So they are not even available. He's in treatment. He's not even around. She's like a single mom, and she's about to become a single mom, sadly. So what's happened is, very organically, the community has come together. Her developments come together. There's a meal train that's going on. So some of those things can really kind of help out. But for regular dealing with day to day, I think what happens is people's friends become family. And we live in a very international, pluralistic, there's so many people from so many cultures, at least here in Florida, I'm sure from all around maybe too, where family isn't necessarily right next door. So friends become family and they help out each other with their kids. Maybe they, on a Friday night, get together all together so it feels like family, going out to dinner and the kids can play. Sometimes it's childcare. If there's a doctor's appointment, I'll watch your kid, you watch my kid. So those things happen kind of naturally, which helps.
What happens, or how do you guide people who are just afraid to ask for help?
Right. And that is a big thing for sure. Many of us feel we can do it all ourselves. So I think the first thing is recognizing it's okay. It's okay to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make us less than. It doesn't make us, we're not weak because we need help, whether it's help from a clinical standpoint or help just like, I need somebody to watch my kid for an hour so I can go get a haircut. There's nothing wrong. And with asking for help, it's important that we do that, and to reciprocate that. Those who don't like asking for help are usually the first to help literally everybody else, right? So to reciprocate that can feel just as great. So it's the ask, but it's also the give, both back and forth, and really giving permission to be able to do that. There are a lot of online support too. So there's meetups. If you go on meetup.com, you can find pretty much just about anything. So there are single mom groups that you can go out and meet other people very easily if you don't even know other people around.
We're talking a lot about parenting and moms, dads, and we had a question just come in, and how do I deal with inquiries about why you're not a parent?
Oh, yeah.
In this case, this person can't have children medically. And some women treat her as she's failed at her one job. So that's a little heartbreaking, right? Because that's just some mean girl stuff. I don't like that, but it's a reality. So how do you deal with those inquiries? Like, what's the proper talk track? And is there one? And then how do you overcome that guilt?
Right.
Being able to have children.
Sure. Right. One of the things that I have learned, I think, just from doing what I do, that I try to tell others, especially even in my own house, that never assume people have kids. You know, like get in the car. And I actually failed at it. I came home traveling and we came in at 2 a.m. and I like an idiot, I asked the Lyft driver, oh, so do you have kids? That's like the biggest no-no. I never do that because not everybody does. And even my family, they're so trained. We got in the house and they couldn't believe I asked that question because not everybody does. And I learned that he was dealing with fertility issues. We had a very long, he's amazing, and I felt really horrible actually. But it is not, you know, some people decide not to have children by choice. Some people cannot have children and they've been trying because they're dealing with fertility. So there are individuals out there that have really made the decision. One of my closest friends, she's made that decision. She does not want to have children. They travel. I can't tell you how many times they've been to Italy, and they're having this other kind of wonderful life. There's lots of ways of living, and how lucky are we all. So I think it's for people to just be sensitive to the fact. So don't assume if a couple is married and they don't have children that they're trying to have children or not. So I think if we can change the language and change the way we think about it. And for the person that has been struggling with fertility and they're trying to have children, or they are at the point that they cannot, I think it's making peace within that and finding ways of going back to self-care, going back to really caring for oneself and how to approach life in such a different way, that to give themselves permission that that also can be okay to heal, to grieve the loss of their vision, because it is a grief process for sure for somebody who wanted to have children and is not able to. So paying attention to that grief and acknowledging that and moving through those emotions. Yeah.
What's a safe response when someone asks that question, though? As women, we tend to over-explain sometimes instead of just saying, I choose not to right now, or the time isn't right. Well, what's a safe response that's like a go-to that you would suggest?
Well, especially for people who have the animals, one of the greatest responses I have, oh, I have 3 furry children, my 2 dogs and my cat. And people say that all the time, you know, about their animals. So that's one way to kind of shut it down, you know, and people acknowledge, oh, right, yeah, you don't have kids, but you have these great animals. And I mean, I think it depends on who the person is. Right? If it's a family member and they're just being pushy and they're being invasive about it, and maybe like if it's a mother-in-law that's like driving you crazy about, so when are you guys having children, and they don't, you know, they're not privy to everything that's going on, maybe telling your husband or partner to like, can you please have a conversation with that person? If it's more of a coworker or like an acquaintance person, you know, you can just say, you know what, we're enjoying our life, the 2 of us. And it kind of shuts that down also. You're not going to give them opportunity to have the follow-up question. They will pick up that message, I'm sure.
Would you say the same for dads when there's the struggle to have children or they just don't want them? So those responses would kind of balance that couple.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You know, for dads, I mean, humor is a really great way to be able to kind of address that conversation too. So if a guy's asked, so why don't you guys have kids? And they're at this last week, and they were at a party, and there were like these kids running around, and you know, it was very stressful, a pool party with lots of young kids. And so he could use humor, and he says, see those kids, that's my birth control. You know, I mean, there's lots of ways to handle it that they can kind of stop the conversation. Yeah, depends how open you want to be.
Great. In our conversations, you've mentioned the connection between relationship and communication. Mm-hmm. Did I state that right?
Yes.
Can you explain
Yes.
what it is?
Sure. So when I'm doing couples counseling, I talk with couples about there's very key foundation hallmark parts of what that relationship looks like. Trust is part of it, but one huge part is communication. Without communication, everything else kind of can really fall apart. For some reason, we all think that we're mind readers. We think, or we make a lot of assumptions that our partner knows exactly what to do and how to do it, but it's not that case. So having really good, strong, healthy, clean communication helps avoid misunderstandings, and it helps us really meet each other's needs in a very healthy way. So that's why I think communication is one of the most important parts of a relationship, and really anything in life, for sure.
This wasn't a question that we prepared, it's just off the top of my head, but I'm a firm believer in the book, The Five Love Languages.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I try to put that into my everyday life, and not just about, being loved and the love languages. Can you explain how that book can be translated into everyday lives for mental health and well-being with friendships, couples, those kinds of things?
Sure. It's a fabulous book. It's short, it's easy read, so I highly recommend it to anybody. And there's one for children also. There's the Five Love Languages for adults, and there's one for children. And he does travel around. I think his name's Gary Chapman. He does travel around and speak. He was in Fort Lauderdale in the last 6 months or so. So what it talks about is, and I'm not an expert in it, but I know it from kind of a surface level, that there's the five love languages that we all have, that people can speak different languages to the other. So whereas my love language, the way I feel love, the way I feel connection and feel, I feel close to my partner, might be something like, it's not this, but I'll just say it's gifts. Okay. It's gifts. So if my husband comes home and has bought me a diamond ring, or picks up some flowers, or buys things for me, that's how I feel love from him. And I'm assuming maybe that's his love language too. So I'll do the exact same thing for him. Let's say I'll bring him home, different gifts. I pick something up the store for him. But if that's not his love language, he won't feel love. I could bring home gifts every day till I'm blue in the face. His love language might be quality time or physical touch. That's how he feels love. So what we end up doing in mistake really is doing the other thing for the person that we really want for ourselves. So it's becoming fluent in each other's love language. So that can apply in the workplace. That could apply with friendships. If you have a good friend that they really just want quality time, and you think it's is it acts of service, I think, doing things for somebody else. They just want to have time with you. It doesn't matter that you've picked up things for them. So it's understanding what the other person needs so that we can meet their needs. And it just works so much better when we do that.
We had a question come in around when I mentioned Mean Girls. And they're asking, what recommendations do you have for those of us with alternative lifestyles, or even who simply look different in different situations or office situations, including dealing with kids, friends, parents, etc. And then you actually start to feel judgmental or uncomfortable, and they put in parentheses like high school again. And this happens all the time. And I mean, I can say, we had a joke earlier today when we were setting up, and I came into the room and the girls were like, "Oh, we were just talking about you." And I went, the last, right? But so I just let that stuff roll, because nobody's going to like me 100% of the time, and that's okay. But what other suggestions do you have for coping with those uncomfortable situations? Because we've all been there.
Oh, definitely, for sure. It's like the book Queen Bees and Wannabes. That is real, for sure. And that is something that plays out. It's funny how you could be an adult and place into a situation and feel like it's middle school all over again. And so I think the very first thing is, for the person that feels like, why are people not liking me? I just feel so uncomfortable around all these people, is, we, like kind of what you're saying, we don't have to be liked by everybody, but we have to like ourselves. So I think the very first thing is making sure that our self-esteem is intact, that we're feeling good about ourselves, that we're confident with who we are. That goes first and foremost, because then that really does help when other people just act stupid. It's just stupid, right? So if other people are acting in ways that are not nice or mean or speaking at a turn, and if it's legit bullying, then we want to address that, right? Just like our kids, if we're educating our kids in school, if they're dealing with bullying, we have to address that. Most of the time, as we know, when people are not nice and they're mean, there's insecurity within themselves. There's jealousy within themselves. So to let that roll is probably the best thing, and to a lot of ignore, just like we tell our kids, ignore, you know. And but when it's disrespectful and it's mean spirited, you have to address what that is, for sure. I guess it would depend on what the situation is. Obviously, I'd have to know a little bit more, but yeah.
We talked a bit about the stigma of, you know, going to therapy or just seeking help. And I struggled with going to my own therapist for a long time before I actually just made the appointment. How would you suggest people overcome that fear of, or how do they decide that they actually need, you know, a therapist? Like, why does it matter? What is it that says, hey, something within you needs to get resolved? Yeah. So how do they make that decision?
Yeah. It's so interesting because there are some cultures that seeing a therapist is like seeing their hairdresser, literally. Like everyone has a therapist. I forget where in South America that's Brazil. I forget. I don't even want to say it out of turn. But there is a country. They have the highest number of psychotherapists and people that are going to see therapists like it's nothing. So I'm not that, you know, that everybody. It's back to eliminating that stigma. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Sometimes it's just helpful to have an objective person. And it doesn't mean that that you're crazy, right? It's getting rid of that off the bat. So it might be problem solving. So the very first thing is saying, you know what, sometimes I feel like I've been talking to my friends about this over and over. I feel like a broken record. That, you know, if you're a good friend, you can even say to a person that's leaning on you a lot, you know, hey, maybe you should go get some help. It's okay to go do that. Modeling it. If we're modeling it ourselves and we're open about it and talking about it, oh yeah, I'm seeing a therapist, you know, oh great, can you give me their name? If we just reduce that barrier, it's going to help so much. So why do people go? They're feeling like they have a situation that they need to sort through. A lot of the times for me, within my practice, it might be parent-child stuff. It might be dealing with grief and loss. It might be something that they feel that they haven't been able to share as openly. It's more of a personal, private matter. So having that confidentiality is a very helpful thing, having somebody that they can talk to and lean on in a way that is a comfortable, warm environment, but non-threatening, and that it's okay. Everybody could probably use a little bit of therapy, right? If we just kind of normalize it, it would certainly help a lot, for sure.
We have just about 15 minutes left, give or take, but I wanted to ask you before we start wrapping up, do you have anything else you'd like to add that we didn't talk about today? Anything else that you'd like to address that you think we should know?
I think we've covered so much. I think it's wonderful. You know, thank you for really this time in this space, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that people might have.
Thank you. And we will send out Karen's email address. It's karen@karenrosenberg.com. But I also wanted to mention that at Avalara, we have an employee assistance program that a lot of people forget about or don't even realize we have. And it's a confidential program that's actually paid for by Avalara. It's available for all Avalarians and their dependents, their eligible dependents, without cost. It handles everything from counseling to legal services, stress management center, childcare, parenting resources. And if you go onto Paylocity on the benefits sections in there as employee resources or employee resource program, and there's actually a 2019 webinar calendar for mental health and wellness, believe it or not. So For July, it's managing pressure and balancing priorities. For August, it's tools for financial well-being. And we can send this list out. You can access that through the wellspringeap.org website, which we'll also send out. So we have a lot of options here to support people in the company, and oftentimes no cost. So it's really great for us. Are there any questions in any of our locations? We have Green Bay on the line. We have Seattle. Sarah, do you have anything in Seattle? Nope. All right. Well, Karen, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate you joining us. It was so helpful. This is recorded, so I'll send you the link once we clean it up, and we will send out the link to everybody who registered along with your contact information. So if you have any other questions, feel free to email the board members. Otherwise, thank you everyone for your time today, and we look forward to our next fireside chat next month. Thanks, Karen. We'll talk soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.